My name is Lauren Chase, 33 years old and the forgotten middle child of the Chase software dynasty. I grew up in Winnetka, one of Chicago's wealthiest suburbs, in a sprawling colonial with 6 bedrooms, a heated indoor pool, and a lawn that required 3 gardeners to maintain. From the outside, we were the picture-perfect American success story. My grandfather, Richard Chase, started Chase Software Systems in his garage in 1980 with nothing but a second-hand computer and a revolutionary idea for inventory management software. He built it from scratch into a regional powerhouse before my father, Gerald Chase, took over in 1997. Dad expanded the company aggressively. Under his leadership, Chase Software grew from a $12 million family business to a $55 million enterprise with over 220 employees and clients across the country. Every holiday dinner, every family vacation, every weekend barbecue inevitably turned into a celebration of his business genius. The Chase name became synonymous with success in Chicago business circles, and Dad never let anyone forget it, especially his children. There were 3 of us Chase kids. My older brother, Derek, 39, was the golden child. Despite never showing any real aptitude for the business, he majored in communications, partied through college, and still Dad handed him a vice president position the day after graduation. Derek spent more time on his boat or with his rotating cast of girlfriends than in the office. But somehow Dad remained convinced he was the natural heir to the Chase throne. Then there was me, Lauren, perpetually stuck in the middle at 33. Unlike my siblings, I inherited my grandfather's passion for technology. I taught myself coding at 13 and built my first app at 16. I studied computer science and business at Carnegie Mellon and had legitimate innovative ideas for modernizing the company. Yet somehow, Dad always looked right through me during business discussions, as if I were invisible. My younger sister, Kayla, 30, rounded out our trio. She leveraged our family name to become a lifestyle influencer with hundreds of thousands of followers who loved her perfectly curated glimpses into old-money Midwest living. She had zero interest in software or business operations but never missed an opportunity to post about being a Chase software heir while contributing nothing to the company's success. Mom, Sandra, came from old Chicago money and approached family conflict the way all proper Lakeshore wives did, by ignoring it completely and pouring another glass of Chardonnay. She played peacekeeper, but ultimately enabled Dad's worst behaviors, especially his dismissal of my business acumen. Gerald, maybe you should listen to Lauren's idea, she would occasionally suggest at dinner, only to immediately back down when Dad shot her that look. Sandra, please. This is actual business we are discussing, he would say before turning back to Derek to continue their conversation about golf or yacht clubs or whatever non-business topic they were actually discussing. Family gatherings always centered around business talk that somehow excluded me. Dad and Derek would dominate conversations with industry jargon and inside jokes while I sat silently, despite understanding the technology and market better than either of them. If I tried to contribute, Dad would smile condescendingly and say something like, "That is sweet, Lauren, but leave the business discussions to the people who understand the real world." The breaking point came when I was 23. Fresh out of Carnegie Mellon with honors, I had developed a cloud-based integration solution that could have revolutionized our product line years before competitors entered that space. I spent months preparing a comprehensive business plan, market analysis, and technical specifications. Dad finally agreed to let me pitch during a board meeting, supposedly as a professional courtesy. I still remember walking into that mahogany-paneled boardroom, laptop and presentation materials in hand, heart pounding with a mixture of nervousness and excitement. The board members, all men in their 50s and 60s who had been Dad's friends for decades, watched with polite but distant expressions as I connected my laptop to the projector. 10 minutes into my presentation, Dad checked his watch, sighed loudly, and raised his hand to stop me mid-sentence. "I think we have seen enough," he said with a tight smile that did not reach his eyes. "Lauren, sweetheart. This is all very creative, but completely impractical for a serious enterprise like ours. Our clients want stability, not experimental technologies." He turned to the board members with an apologetic shrug. "My daughter recently graduated college and is full of these academic ideas. Now, shall we move on to actual business matters?" The humiliation burned through me as I packed up my materials while they chuckled and moved on as if I had never been there. That night, I made a decision that would change everything. I would leave Chicago and the family business behind. I would build something of my own, something so successful that even my father could not dismiss it. I moved to Austin with $6,000 in savings and nothing else. My parents assumed it was just a phase. "She will be back when she runs out of money," I overheard Dad telling Mom on the phone during one of our increasingly rare calls. Those early years were brutal. My tiny studio apartment in a questionable neighborhood cost nearly my entire monthly budget. I survived on ramen noodles and coffee, working 80-hour weeks, first at entry-level coding jobs, then as a freelance developer. Every dollar I could save went into building my own company. I created Summit Ventures under the pseudonym Ellie Monroe. The initials stood for Lauren Elizabeth, but nobody knew that. I wanted my success or failure to be completely disconnected from the Chase name. I started small, developing custom enterprise solutions for startups, reinvesting every profit. By year 3, I had 10 employees and a real office in downtown Austin. The breakthrough came when I developed a proprietary integration platform that allowed legacy systems to communicate seamlessly with modern cloud services, ironically, similar to what I had pitched to my father years earlier. Venture capital came calling, but I maintained majority ownership, determined to control my destiny. Over the next 7 years, I strategically acquired smaller tech companies that complemented our services. Summit Ventures grew to a $220 million valuation with offices in 3 cities. Throughout it all, I maintained my pseudonym in all business dealings. In the tech world, Ellie Monroe was known as a brilliant, reclusive founder who rarely gave interviews or appeared at industry events. My family remained completely unaware of my success. During holiday calls and occasional visits, I kept conversations vague, describing my work as doing okay or still figuring things out. Dad never pressed for details, as he had already written off my career as inconsequential. This suited me perfectly as I built Summit into something that would one day shock them all. What they did not know was that for the past year, I had been strategically acquiring shares in companies that were key suppliers and clients of Chase Software. I studied their quarterly reports, identified their weaknesses, and positioned Summit as the perfect buyer to take Chase Software to the next level. 6 months ago, I had my CFO send an anonymous acquisition offer through a third party, which my father predictably rejected without proper consideration. Now, 10 years after being humiliated in that boardroom, I was returning home for Christmas with a plan that would change everything. Chase Software was struggling with outdated technology and losing market share. My father did not know it yet, but I was about to become his worst nightmare and his only salvation. The week before Christmas, I was in my corner office overlooking the Austin skyline, finalizing the paperwork for what would be the most important deal of my life. My assistant knocked and entered with my travel itinerary. "Your private jet is confirmed for Monday at 11 a.m., she said. "Are you sure you do not want to bring your executive team?" I shook my head. "This is personal. I need to handle it alone." After she left, my phone rang. It was Natasha, my best friend since those early struggling days when we shared a wall in adjacent studio apartments. "Are you really going through with this family Christmas charade?" she asked without preamble. "After everything they did? After 2 years of barely speaking to them?" I sighed, spinning in my chair to face the window. "I have to be there in person when it happens, Natasha. I need to see his face." "I remember the last Christmas disaster," she said carefully. "Your father announced Derek's promotion to executive vice president while you sat there with your unacknowledged Series B funding round." The memory stung. Dad had raised a toast to the future of Chase Software while looking directly at my brother, who had been too hungover to contribute anything meaningful to the strategy meeting earlier that day. "This time will be different," I promised. "Everything changes this Christmas." I spent the evening packing, deliberately choosing my wardrobe to make a statement. Gone were the casual clothes my family associated with me. Instead, I packed new money suits, a Chanel dress for the holiday dinner, Louboutin heels, and the subtle signifiers of success that only the wealthy recognize: a Patek Philippe watch, a Bottega Veneta handbag, small diamond earrings from Tiffany. None of it ostentatious, all of it unmistakably expensive. Monday morning, I boarded the private jet I rarely used. During the 4-hour flight, I reviewed the contract once more, ensuring every detail was perfect. The irony was not lost on me that for years I had flown coach to Chicago, eating airplane peanuts and squeezing into middle seats while building the empire that would now allow me to arrive in style. The jet landed at a private airfield outside Chicago. A black Mercedes waited on the tarmac. As we drove through familiar neighborhoods toward Winnetka, I felt a strange mixture of nostalgia and determination hardening within me. The Chase family estate looked exactly as it always had. Imposing colonial architecture, perfectly manicured grounds now dusted with December snow, a wreath already hanging on the door. I instructed the driver to wait, then took a deep breath before walking up the steps I had climbed thousands of times before. Mom answered the door herself, bypassing the housekeeper in her eagerness to see me. Her eyes widened slightly as she took in my appearance. "Lauren, darling," she said, embracing me with the scent of expensive perfume and the faint note of midday wine on her breath. "You look different. Is that a Rolex?" "Patek Philippe, actually," I said, returning her hug. "Good to see you, Mom." She ushered me inside, chattering about Christmas preparations and Kayla's latest Instagram milestone. I nodded politely, setting down my bag in the grand foyer with its sweeping staircase and crystal chandelier. "Home sweet home, with all its complicated memories." "Your father is in his study," Mom said. "He has been very busy with some big deal. Very hush-hush, even with me." I smiled. "I will say hello before I settle in." Dad's study had always been somewhat forbidden territory, a masculine sanctuary of leather, mahogany, and business journals. I knocked once and entered without waiting for a response, a small act of defiance. He looked up from his desk, reading glasses perched on his nose, surprise flickering across his face before settling into his usual mild disinterest. "Lauren, you made it." He stood for a brief, awkward hug, then gestured vaguely toward the chair across from his desk. The trip from Austin was smooth, I said, deliberately not taking the offered seat. I flew private. Saves time. A momentary confusion crossed his features. Private. That must have been expensive. I shrugged. Business is good. Before he could inquire further, his phone rang, and with a perfunctory, "Excuse me, this is important," he turned away to answer it. I used the opportunity to glance at the papers on his desk. There it was, the Summit Ventures acquisition proposal, with my company logo prominently displayed. My heart raced, but I maintained my composure as he finished his call. "Sorry about that," he said hastily, gathering the papers into a folder. "Big things happening at the company. You would not understand." The familiar dismissal rolled off me like water now. "Of course, Dad. I will let you get back to it." I left his study and headed upstairs to my old bedroom, which Mom had maintained as a shrine to my teenage self. Debate trophies, computer science awards, and Carnegie Mellon pennants still adorned the walls, dusty testaments to achievements that had never impressed the one person whose approval I had sought most. After freshening up, I headed downstairs and found Derek in the living room, already drinking scotch at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. He had our father's tall frame and confident posture, but years of privileged indulgence had softened him around the middle. Well, the prodigal sister returns," he said, raising his glass in mock toast. "Still playing with computers in Austin?" "Something like that," I replied with a tight smile. "How is your little startup doing? Making any money yet?" His condescension was so familiar it almost felt like home. Before I could answer, Kayla burst into the room, phone held at the perfect angle to capture her entrance for her Instagram followers. "Lauren is here, everyone. Family reunion time," she announced to her phone before air kissing my cheeks. "You look expensive, sis. Did you finally find yourself a rich boyfriend?" "No, just working hard," I said, stepping out of her camera frame. Derek brought his new girlfriend, Kayla stage whispered, still recording. "Brittany. She is 25 and does Pilates professionally." On cue, a willowy blonde entered the room wearing designer jeans and a cashmere sweater. Derek immediately pulled her to his side with proprietary pride. "Brittany, this is my sister Lauren. She lives in Austin and does tech stuff." His vague wave dismissed a decade of my professional accomplishments. "Oh my God, I love Austin," Brittany gushed. "The restaurants are amazing." Our awkward small talk was interrupted by the sound of Dad's raised voice from his study. Though the words were muffled, his excited tone carried through the house. "Yes, absolutely. Tomorrow after Christmas, $55 million is the final offer. Summit Ventures has been very insistent on the terms." I excused myself to the kitchen, needing a moment alone. Maria, our housekeeper of 22 years, was preparing food for the next day's feast. "Miss Lauren," she smiled warmly. "It is good to see you. You look well. Austin agrees with you." "Thanks, Maria. Need any help?" She shook her head. "Your mother wants everything perfect for tomorrow. Big day, she says." "Your father has news." I nodded, wondering if the entire household staff knew about the sale before his own children did. The pre-dinner hour was excruciating. Mom fluttered about with forced cheerfulness. Dad checked his phone every 3 minutes. Derek bragged about his new boat to anyone who would listen. And Kayla documented everything for her followers. I sipped my wine slowly, observing the family dynamics with new eyes. No longer the hurt daughter seeking validation, but a successful businesswoman about to change the game entirely. "Dinner is ready," Mom finally announced, ushering us toward the formal dining room where the family had gathered for holiday meals for 3 generations. The Chase family Christmas dinner had always been a formal affair. The massive mahogany dining table gleamed under the light of the crystal chandelier, set with the fine china that only emerged for special occasions. Sterling silver candelabras held ivory-tapered candles, casting a warm glow over the holiday centerpiece of evergreen pine cones and red berries. I noted with mild amusement that I had been seated at the far end of the table, as far from Dad at the head as physically possible. Typical. Derek sat at Dad's right hand, with Brittany beside him, while Kayla occupied the spot to Dad's left. Mom took her traditional place at the opposite end, with me beside her, symbolically separated from the inner circle of family business by the length of polished wood between us. Maria and the kitchen staff brought out course after course: butternut squash soup, harvest salad with candied walnuts and cranberries, and finally the main course, a beautifully roasted prime rib, accompanied by all the traditional holiday sides. Dad carved with ceremonial precision while Kayla filmed for her social media, providing running commentary. I caught Mom wincing slightly at Kayla's performance before taking a large sip of her wine. By my count, it was her 4th glass since I had arrived. Once our plates were filled, Dad raised his glass for the traditional Chase family gratitude ritual. Derek went first, as the eldest always did. "I am thankful for another strong year at Chase Software," he began, though I knew from my research that the company had actually lost market share for the 3rd consecutive quarter. "And for my new 45-foot yacht, the Chase Legacy," he squeezed Brittany's hand, "and for new beginnings with this amazing woman." Brittany giggled and kissed his cheek while Kayla made exaggerated gagging motions when Derek was not looking. Kayla went next, phone still in hand. I am so thankful to have reached 1.2 million followers this year. My collaboration with Glow Collective has been amazing, and I am grateful to represent our family brand to the world." She beamed at Dad, who nodded approving. When my turn came, I set down my fork and spoke clearly. "I am thankful for the lessons life has taught me. That sometimes rejection leads to the right path, that persistence matters more than privilege, and that success is the best teacher." I raised my glass to finding your own way. Dad frowned slightly, perhaps detecting something in my tone, but quickly moved on to his own gratitude speech, which predictably centered on the business legacy he had built. As Maria brought in the desserts, Dad suddenly tapped his knife against his crystal water glass. "I have an announcement to make," he said, standing at the head of the table. "One that affects everyone here." The table fell silent. Even Kayla lowered her phone. "As you know, I have dedicated my life to building Chase Software into a leader in our industry. But all good things evolve, and the time has come for change." He paused dramatically. "I have decided to sell the company." Derek choked on his wine. "What? Dad, you cannot be serious." Dad raised his hand for silence. "I have been in negotiations for months with a very interested buyer. The deal will be finalized tomorrow." Kayla gasped theatrically. "But Daddy, what about the Chase legacy?" "That brings me to the second part of my announcement," Dad continued. "The proceeds from the sale will not be going to you children as inheritance." Both Derek and Kayla erupted in protest. "That is our birthright." Derek slammed his fist on the table, rattling the china. "What do you mean?" Kayla wailed, now live streaming the family drama to her followers. "Where is the money going?" Dad waited for their outbursts to subside. "Your mother and I will be using part of it for our retirement. The rest will go to establishing the Chase Foundation, a charitable organization to support technology education." "This is outrageous." Derek stood, his face flushed with anger. "I have given 10 years to this company. You promised it would be mine someday." Throughout the chaos, I remained perfectly still, taking small, deliberate bites of dessert. Mom noticed my calm and gave me a quizzical look. "Lauren," she said quietly, "you do not seem surprised." The table gradually quieted as everyone turned toward me. "Actually," I said, setting down my fork with precision, "I have just one question." I looked directly at my father. "Who is the buyer?" Dad's chest puffed with pride. "A very successful tech investment firm called Summit Venture. They are paying $55 million, which is more than generous given our recent market challenges." I took a sip of water, using the moment to steady myself. The room felt charged with a strange electricity, the moment suspended between past and future. "Dad," I said finally, my voice calm and clear, "I am Summit Ventures." The room went completely silent. I could hear the antique grandfather clock ticking in the hallway, marking the seconds of frozen disbelief. For several heartbeats, nobody moved. I watched the emotions play across my father's face in rapid succession. Confusion, disbelief, shock, and finally the first flickers of anger. Derek was the first to react, knocking over his wine glass as he stood abruptly. The red liquid spread across the white tablecloth. "What the hell are you talking about?" he demanded. Kayla, incredibly, was still live streaming. "Oh my God," she whispered to her phone. "Did my sister just say she owns Summit Ventures, the company buying our family business?" Mom reached for her wine glass, found it empty, and promptly grabbed the bottle instead. I stood slowly, feeling a strange sense of calm after carrying this secret for so long. "Ellie Monroe," I said. "Lauren Elizabeth Monroe. That is the name I have been using professionally for the past decade while building Summit Ventures into a $220 million company." Dad found his voice at last. "This is preposterous," he sputtered. "Summit Ventures is run by Ellie Monroe, a respected technology investor. Not by my daughter, who has been playing at startups in Austin." I reached into my purse and removed my business card case, made of sleek brushed platinum with the Summit Ventures logo engraved on its surface. I slid a card across the table toward him. "Actually, Dad, I am Ellie Monroe. I founded Summit Ventures 10 years ago after you dismissed my business proposal and humiliated me in front of your board." Dad snatched up the card, staring at it as if it might transform in his hands. "This is some kind of joke." Summit Ventures now owns controlling interests in Apex Technologies, Datalink Solutions, and Cloud Core Industries, I continued, naming Chase Software's 3 largest suppliers. "We also recently acquired majority stakes in your 2 biggest clients, Brennan Manufacturing and Hartfield Distribution. The Chase Software acquisition is the final piece in a strategic plan I have been implementing for the past 18 months. You have been spying on our business," Derek accused. "No, Derek, it is called market research. Everything I learned about Chase Software came from publicly available financial reports, industry analysis, and completely legal channels." I turned back to Dad. "The truth is Chase Software has been failing for years. Your technology is outdated, your management practices are from the last century, and you have lost 24% market share in the past 3 years. How dare you?" Dad began, but I cut him off. "I tried to help you first, you know. 6 months ago, Summit Ventures sent an anonymous partnership proposal that would have provided the capital and technology upgrades you desperately needed. You rejected it without even reading past the first page. Dad's eyes widened in recognition. The Horizon proposal. That was you. I nodded. I wanted to give you a chance to accept help without knowing it came from me. Your pride would not allow it. So this whole time you have been plotting against your own family. Garrett shouted. Not plotting, Derek, purchasing, legally, for $55 million. Which is honestly more than its current market value. I kept my voice level. And let us be clear, this company stopped being our family business the day Dad made it evident that only one child would ever have a meaningful role in it, despite that child's complete lack of qualifications. Kayla finally lowered her phone, the reality apparently sinking in. So, you are going to be our boss now? She asked in a small voice. Technically, yes, I confirmed, though the current management structure will be completely reorganized. Dad stood abruptly, his chair scraping loudly against the hardwood. This deal is off, he declared. I will not sell my company to my own daughter as some kind of revenge plot. I shook my head slowly. The contracts are signed, Dad. The board has approved the sale. The press release goes out tomorrow at 9 a.m. Eastern Time. Legally, Summit Ventures already owns Chase Software. I will fight this, he threatened, though uncertainty had crept into his eyes. Your lawyers have already vetted the deal extensively, I interrupted gently. They advised you it was the best offer you would get in the current market. What exactly will you tell them now that you are upset because the brilliant CEO you have been negotiating with turns out to be your daughter? Mom spoke for the first time since my revelation, her voice slightly slurred but her gaze surprisingly clear. All these years, Lauren, all these years you were building this while you thought I was failing, I finished for her. Yes, exactly. Dad slammed his hand on the table. You have a choice to make right now, Lauren. You can be my daughter, or you can be the person who took my company. You cannot be both. The ultimatum hung in the air between us, so predictable it almost made me sad. 10 years ago it would have devastated me. Now it merely confirmed what I had always known. That is where you are wrong, Dad, I said quietly. I am both. I always have been. You just refuse to see it. Kayla had started crying in earnest, mascara tracking down her perfectly contoured cheeks. What happens to us, to our trust funds, our positions? That depends, I answered honestly, on whether you want to actually work for the company or just claim its benefits. Derek pointed an accusing finger at me. You planned this for Christmas deliberately, did you not? To humiliate us. I planned it for Christmas because I knew everyone would be here, I corrected him. And because 10 years ago at Christmas dinner, Dad announced that he was promoting you to vice president despite your complete lack of qualifications, while telling me that my degree from Carnegie Mellon and 3 years of coding experience was not enough to warrant even an entry-level management position. Dad's face flushed at the reminder. That was different. Derek is my son, my firstborn. And there it is, I said softly. The real reason I was never given a chance. Not my ideas, not my education, not my work ethic, just my gender. The painful truth silenced the room. Even Derek had the grace to look uncomfortable. This conversation is over, Dad finally declared. Everyone out. I need to call my attorneys. He stormed from the dining room, the sound of his study doors slamming echoing through the house. Mom rose unsteadily to her feet. I should go check on him, she murmured, though she paused beside my chair. Are you really worth $220 million? I nodded. And all those times you could not come home for the holidays because you said you could not afford the plane ticket. I was running a company, Mom, and I needed you all to keep underestimating me. She touched my shoulder briefly, an unreadable expression on her face, then followed after Dad. As the dining room emptied, I remained seated, looking at the abandoned Christmas feast around me. The prime rib had grown cold, the candles burned low, and the family I had once desperately wanted to impress had scattered in shock and anger. It should have felt like victory. Instead, a hollow ache spread through my chest as I realized that while I had finally earned their attention, I was further than ever from earning their understanding. I retreated to my childhood bedroom as the house descended into chaos below. Through the floor, I could hear Dad shouting on the phone, presumably to his lawyers, while Mom's placating tones rose and fell in counterpoint. Occasionally, Derek's angry voice would join the cacophony, followed by Kayla's dramatic wailing. My old room remained frozen in time, a museum to the person I had been. The twin bed with its navy blue comforter, the desk where I had spent countless hours coding and dreaming, the bookshelves lined with computer science textbooks and the few fantasy novels I had allowed myself as rare indulgences. Debate trophies and academic medals gathered dust, achievements that had never impressed the one person whose approval I had sought most. I ran my fingers along the spines of my old journals, pulling one out at random. Inside were detailed business plans, algorithm sketches, and notes for the very cloud integration platform that had eventually become Summit's flagship product. The irony was not lost on me that everything I had built had begun right here in this room where I had felt most invisible. A sharp knock on the door interrupted my thoughts. I opened it to find Derek, his tie loosened, face flushed with either anger or alcohol, possibly both. We need to talk, he said, pushing past me into the room. I closed the door and leaned against it, arms crossed. About what, Derek? How I ruined your Christmas. Or how you plan to inherit a company you helped run into the ground. You think you are so clever, he hissed, pacing the small space. Little Lauren with her computers and her secret identity. Did you enjoy lying to our faces all these years? About as much as you enjoyed taking credit for my ideas, I replied evenly. Remember when I suggested Chase Software should move to cloud-based solutions 6 years ago during a family dinner? Dad dismissed it as trendy tech jargon, but somehow 3 months later, you presented the exact same concept as your own strategic vision. Derek stopped pacing, his expression darkening. I was the one who stayed. I was the one who put in the time at the company while you ran off to Austin to prove some point. You put in time, yes, but what did you actually contribute, Derek? Besides expenses on the company credit card for client dinners and a corner office you used primarily for naps between hangovers. His face contorted with fury. You do not know what you are talking about. I know about the $320,000 you embezzled through fake vendor accounts, I told him. I know about the phantom consulting fees that went directly to your personal offshore account. I have transaction records, account numbers, and IP logs showing the falsified entries came from your office computer on days when only you were present. I am not planning to pursue criminal charges, Derek. That would hurt the company during the transition, but do not test me. He took a threatening step toward me. You would destroy your own brother. I would hold accountable a thief who happens to be related to me. There is a difference. We stood in tense silence until he finally turned away. This is not over, he warned, yanking open the door. Actually, it is, I said to his retreating back. You just do not realize it yet. I had barely closed the door when another knock came. This time it was Kayla, her makeup freshly touched up. So, you were like a secret millionaire, she said without preamble, entering my room and sitting on my bed. That is actually kind of badass. I could not help but laugh at her rapid pivot. Is that what you are going with? 5 minutes ago you were crying about losing your heiress status. She shrugged. I am adaptable. It is essential for influencer longevity. She looked up with sudden calculation in her eyes. Just think of the content we could create together. My sister, the tech mogul. My followers would eat that up. Is that why you are here? To propose a business collaboration. More like a mutual arrangement, she said, smoothing her dress. You need a media presence that humanizes your company. And I need an authentic connection to actual business success instead of just looking pretty with products. The nakedly transactional nature of her proposal was so typically Kayla that I almost admired it. And what about actually working for the company? Contributing something beyond your Instagram aesthetic? She wrinkled her nose. God, no. Coding is boring and business meetings make me want to die. But I could be the brand ambassador, the face of the company for the lifestyle market. The face of an enterprise software integration platform for the lifestyle market, I repeated slowly. Do you hear yourself? Kayla stood, straightening her shoulders. Fine. Mock me like everyone else in this family. But my social media skills are actually valuable in today's market whether you respect them or not. I have built my own brand from nothing, just like you did. The parallel had never occurred to me before, and I found myself momentarily speechless. There was a strange kind of truth to it. I will think about it, I said finally. But not tonight. She nodded, apparently satisfied with even this small concession. Just so you know, I have already posted about a major family business shakeup, without specifics. My engagement is through the roof. After she left, I sat at my old desk and powered up my laptop to check on the final details for tomorrow's announcement. A gentle knock interrupted me again. Instead of household staff, Mom entered, looking surprisingly sober. She had changed from her dinner dress into a cashmere sweater and slacks. Your father has locked himself in his study with a bottle of scotch and the company bylaws, she said, settling into the window seat where she used to sit and read me stories as a child. He is convinced there must be some loophole to stop the sale. There is not, I said simply. His lawyers already confirmed it. She nodded, looking around the room thoughtfully. You know, I kept everything exactly as you left it. I always thought you would come back once you got this out of your system. It was never a phase, Mom. It was a career, a life. $220 million, she mused, shaking her head slightly. My little girl built a company worth $220 million in secret while we all thought you were struggling. I turned to face her fully. You could have asked. Any of you could have shown genuine interest in what I was doing. But none of you ever really wanted to know. Tears welled in her eyes. I knew, Lauren. Not the details, not the scale of your success. But I knew you were special. I saw it when you were little, the way your mind worked differently, how you understood things the rest of us could not grasp. She wiped at her cheeks. I just did not know how to help you, in a family like ours, with a man like your father. You could have stood up for me, I said, the old hurt rising unexpectedly in my throat. All those times he dismissed me, humiliated me. You just sat there. I was wrong, she admitted quietly. I told myself I was keeping the peace, being a supportive wife. But I failed as a mother when you needed an advocate. The simple acknowledgement pierced something long frozen inside me. I had come prepared for anger, for accusations, even for legal threats. I had not prepared for genuine remorse. What happens now? Mom asked after a long silence. Tomorrow morning, the acquisition becomes public. Chase Software will become a subsidiary of Summit Venture. The company name will remain for now, but operations will be completely restructured. I hesitated, then added, Dad and Derek will be offered advisory positions with no actual authority, if they want them, mostly for appearances during the transition. And you, will you move back to Chicago? I shook my head. I will remain in Austin. We will install a new management team here. She nodded, seeming to understand all I was not saying, that I had outgrown this house, this family dynamic, this version of myself. Your father may never forgive you for this, she warned softly. I know, I acknowledged. But this is not about forgiveness, Mom. It is about finally being seen. After she left, I worked until dawn preparing for the morning's confrontation. As the first gray light filtered through my curtains, I changed into one of my Armani suits, styled my hair into a sleek chignon, and put on the subtle makeup that Ellie Monroe was known for. The morning would bring either a new beginning for the Chase family or its final fracture. Either way, I was ready. The kitchen was eerily quiet when I came down at 7 a.m. Maria silently handed me a cup of coffee, her eyes communicating a mixture of concern and respect. I checked my phone. 3 missed calls from my executive team. A text from Natasha, did you drop the bomb? Are they still breathing? I had just finished responding when Dad appeared in the doorway. He looked older than he had yesterday, the lines around his eyes deeper, his normally perfect posture slightly stooped. He had clearly not slept. My study. Now. His tone left no room for discussion. I followed him down the hallway to the room that had always been the center of Chase family power. The wood-paneled walls were covered with framed accolades, business journal covers featuring Dad, industry awards, photos with politicians and celebrities. Conspicuously absent was any recognition of my achievements, though my Carnegie Mellon graduation photo sat on a side table, half hidden behind more prominent family pictures. Dad took his seat behind the massive desk. I chose not to sit in the visitor's chair as expected. Instead, I perched on the edge of the desk itself, a subtle repositioning of our power dynamic that did not go unnoticed. My attorneys confirm what you said last night, he began without preamble. The sale is legally binding. The board vote was unanimous. Of course it was, I replied. Chase Software has been losing market share for 3 years. Your technology is outdated. Your management structure is bloated, and your development pipeline is empty. The board recognized a good offer when they saw it. $55 million, he said, shaking his head. The company was valued at $75 million just 2 years ago. The company was overvalued 2 years ago, I corrected. And I offered more than any other potential buyer would have. Most would have stripped the assets and dissolved the Chase name entirely. He looked up sharply. And is that your plan? To erase your own family's legacy? No. Despite everything, I respect what grandfather built and what you expanded. The Chase name stays, though the company structure will change significantly. For the first time, uncertainty crossed his features. What exactly are your plans? I had waited 10 years for him to ask my opinion on business matters. The irony was not lost on me. Chase Software will become the enterprise division of Summit Ventures, focusing on updating your legacy products and integrating them with our cloud platforms. We will retain approximately 60% of the current staff, with significant changes to upper management. And me, he asked, the question clearly costing him. You will be offered a position as chairman emeritus, no operational authority, but you will maintain an office and can advise on client relationships during the transition. His jaw tightened. A figurehead role. A respected advisory position, I countered, with full benefits and a generous compensation package. He stood abruptly, walking to the window that overlooked the immaculately maintained garden. For a long moment, he said nothing. How did you do it? He finally asked, his voice quieter. Build something that valuable when you had nothing. No connections, no startup capital. I had my education, I reminded him, the one thing you could not take from me. And I had tremendous motivation to prove you wrong. He turned back to face me. I expected you to fail. I know that sounds terrible. But 90% of startups never make it past the first 3 years. I thought. He hesitated, seeming to struggle with the words. I thought I was protecting you from inevitable disappointment. By ensuring I never got the chance to try, I raised an eyebrow. That is not protection, Dad. That is control. He flinched slightly. I built this company from what my father started. Expanded it 10 times over. I thought I knew best. But you did not. I said simply, you were wrong about me. Wrong about the direction of the industry. Wrong about Derek being the natural successor. At the mention of my brother, Dad's expression darkened. Derek may have his flaws, but he has been loyal. Derek has been embezzling from the company for at least 3 years, I informed him bluntly. I have all the documentation. $320,000 siphoned through fake vendor accounts. Dad sank back into his chair, the shock of this new revelation apparently too much to process while standing. That cannot be true. The evidence is irrefutable. Gambling debts, mostly sports betting, from what I can tell. Dad buried his face in his hands briefly, before looking back up, suddenly appearing every one of his 70 years. So both my son and my company were failing, and I was too blind to see either. The naked vulnerability in his admission caught me off guard. I had expected more anger, not this broken acceptance. Not blind, I said, softening my tone slightly, just looking in the wrong direction. A long silence stretched between us, filled with decades of misunderstanding and missed opportunity. How did you really do it? He asked again, something in his voice now genuinely sincere for the first time in our relationship. No investors who knew the Chase name. How did you build something so successful? I started small, I explained. Freelance development work to build capital. Then I created a proprietary integration platform that solved a problem every enterprise company has, connecting legacy systems with modern cloud architecture. It was actually based on the proposal you dismissed when I was 23. A flicker of recognition crossed his face. Yes, I refined it, made it more adaptable, used it to attract our first major clients, reinvested every profit, lived in a studio apartment for 3 years to keep overhead low. He almost smiled at that. Built an empire without the Chase name to open doors. Because of that, in some ways, I corrected. Being underestimated is a powerful position if you know how to use. No one saw me coming. Another silence fell, but different now, less hostile. I checked my watch. The press release goes out in 45 minutes. We should discuss next steps. What about Derek and Kayla? He asked. Derek will be offered a choice. Resign quietly with a reasonable severance, or face potential legal consequences for the embezzlement. Kayla. I paused. Kayla actually made a compelling case last night for serving as a brand ambassador. Her social media skills are legitimately valuable in the right context. Dad looked genuinely surprised. You would keep them involved? After everything? This was never about destroying the family, Dad. It was about claiming my place in it, on my terms. He nodded slowly, his gaze dropping to the papers on his desk, then rising again to meet mine with unexpected directness. You outmaneuvered me completely, he said, and I was startled to detect a note of something almost like pride in his voice. Your grandfather would have been impressed. Coming from him, it was as close to approval as I had ever received. I felt a complicated emotion rising in my chest, not quite vindication, not quite forgiveness, but something hovering in the space between. I learned from watching you, I acknowledged, even when you did not think I was paying attention. He extended his hand across the desk. So, Chairman Emeritus. I took his hand, sealing the first professional agreement we had ever made as equals. Welcome to Summit Ventures, Dad. 6 months after that fateful Christmas, I stood in the newly renovated headquarters of Chase Summit Technologies. The former Chase software building had been transformed with open workspaces, state-of-the-art technology, and a collaborative environment that respected the company's history while embracing its future. My role as CEO of Summit Ventures meant I split my time between Austin and Chicago, overseeing the integration of the two companies and the evolution of our expanded product line. The transition had not been easy, but it had been more successful than even my optimistic projections had anticipated. Dad had surprised everyone by embracing his chairman emeritus role with unexpected grace. Once the initial shock and anger had subsided, he found satisfaction in mentoring younger team members and maintaining relationships with long-standing clients. We had established a weekly meeting where he could offer insights on company history and industry relationships, and I found myself actually looking forward to these sessions. For the first time, we were building a relationship based on mutual respect rather than expectations and disappointments. Derek's situation had been more complicated. After facing the evidence of his embezzlement, he had initially threatened legal action. Eventually, cooler heads prevailed. He accepted a conditional offer, repayment of the stolen funds, resignation from his executive position, and enrollment in an MBA program if he wanted any future role in the business. To my surprise, he chose education over exile and was now halfway through his first semester, calling occasionally with genuine questions about business strategy. Kayla had flourished in her new role as brand ambassador for our consumer products division. Her followers had been captivated by the dramatic family business saga, which she carefully presented as a story of female empowerment and family reconciliation. Her tech-focused rebrand had actually opened doors to younger markets we had previously struggled to reach. Mom had perhaps changed the most. She started volunteering with women's education initiatives and even joined the board of a tech incubator for female founders. I want to help other girls like you, she told me, so their mothers do not make the same mistakes I did. As I walked through the office, employees nodded respectfully or smiled in greeting. I was no longer Ellie Monroe, the mysterious founder, nor Lauren Chase, the forgotten middle child. I was simply Lauren, the CEO who had modernized a failing family business and created new opportunities for everyone involved. My assistant interrupted my thoughts. Your father is waiting in the conference room with the quarterly reports, and your mother called to confirm dinner tonight. I thanked her and headed toward the meeting, pausing briefly by the newly installed company timeline in the main lobby. It displayed the evolution of Chase software from my grandfather's garage startup to our current iteration as Chase Summit Technologies. My photo now hung alongside those of my grandfather and father, 3 generations of leadership, with my own achievements listed with the same prominence as theirs. Christmas was approaching again, and this year would be entirely different. We had planned a smaller, more intimate family gathering without the performative traditions that had dominated our previous celebrations. No formal gratitude ritual, no business posturing, just a family still learning how to truly see and hear each other. The journey from rejection to leadership had been longer and more painful than I could have imagined when I left Chicago 10 years ago. The challenges of merging family and business continued daily, requiring patience and perspective I was still developing. There had been moments when the weight of past hurts threatened to overwhelm the progress we had made. Dad still occasionally slipped into his authoritarian approach before catching himself. I sometimes found myself unnecessarily defensive, anticipating dismissal that no longer came. Yet slowly, conversation by conversation, the Chase family was creating a new dynamic. Mom had hosted a dinner last month where, for the first time in my memory, everyone spoke equally, everyone listened, and no one stormed out in anger. Small victories, but meaningful ones. Perhaps the most profound moment had come unexpectedly during a late night at the office, when Dad and I were reviewing the first quarter results after the merger. The numbers had exceeded all projections, with client retention at 97% and new contracts increasing revenue by 34%. "You know," he had said quietly, staring at the spreadsheet, "you have already accomplished more than I did in my first decade running this company." The simple acknowledgement had healed something in me that I had not realized was still broken. The experience had taught me that success itself is not enough to heal family wounds. The satisfaction of proving myself had been sweet but ultimately hollow until it led to genuine connection. I had needed to learn that there is a difference between winning and resolving, between being right and being whole. As I entered the conference room where Dad waited with the quarterly reports, I reflected on how complex the journey had been, from that Christmas revelation to today. The lesson I carried forward was not that success is the best revenge, but that success without reconciliation leaves both sides poorer. True victory came not when I proved my father wrong, but when we both found a way to be right together.